Here we're going to be taking a look at adding numbers, specifically adding both positive and negative numbers. As I do so in this particular lesson, I'm going to be doing it using a way of modeling positives and negative numbers called chips. Really, chips are basically just a way of representing positive and negative numbers. The cool thing about them is that if you're a very tactile kind of learner, you can actually grab like some chips from a game you have around the house or something like that and actually move them around in order to be able to do this on your own. But I'm going to illustrate here on our paper. So in order to do so, I will be using the black chips to represent positive numbers and red chips to represent negative numbers. So for our first problem, we want to be able to show 5 plus 3 using these chips. So in order to do that, the first thing I lay down is 5 positive chips to represent my starting number. So that represents a positive 5 because there's 5 positives. I then am going to add 3 positives to it. So then that means I just add another 3 positives. Typically I'll put them on the next row or something like that just to keep it organized. And then all we have to do here is look at our picture now and say, well, how many do I have? And you can see that we have a grand total of 8 of the black chips. That is 8 positives, which is why 5 plus 3 would equal a positive 8 using this sort of a model. All right, so now that we've kind of gotten the hang of how that works, let's go ahead and move on to our next one here where we're going to be doing 5 plus a negative 3. Well, once again, this one would also start with 5 positives on our board. But instead of adding on 3 more positives, we have to be adding 3 negatives. Well, the negatives, remember, are represented by the red chips. So I'm going to add 3 red chips to the board instead. Now, the trick to using the chips here is recognizing that any time I have a pair of black and red, that pair adds to 0. Because if you have one positive and one negative and add them up, you get 0. They cancel each other out. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to look for any pairs of black and red chips. And notice that if I take all of those pairs out, I can then see what I'm left with. And you notice that what was not canceled out along the way here was 2 black chips, which means that we're left with 2 positives on the board. So our answer is a positive 2. Then we head on to our next one, our negative 5 plus 3. If I'm going to do a negative 5 plus 3 using my chips, the first thing I do is I grab 5 of the negative chips. And again, you can actually do this with physical chips and actually move them around. It's a great way to be able to actually see and feel what's happening with these. So now that I have my 5 negatives, I need to add 3 positives onto my board because I'm doing negative 5 plus 3. So I add those positive 3 onto the board. Now that I've done that, I now can do a little bit of canceling out here because again, I have some pairs of black and red. And so if I cancel out those pairs, notice what I'm left with. I'm left with 2 negative chips on the board, which means then that negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2. All right, and then we can go on to our last one here. And so the last one is going to be a negative 5 plus a negative 3. So again, I start by putting down whatever my first number is, which is the negative 5. So I put 5 negatives on the board. And then I'm going to add 3 more negatives because I'm adding a negative 3. Well, there's nothing to cancel, so all I have to do is just count up what do I have on the board. And I have a grand total of 8 negatives on the board, meaning that it equals negative 8.